Hello, everyone, and welcome to Common Time Podcast, where we bring you world-class professional development for music educators straight to your phone. I'm David Klemmer.
And I'm John Pasquale.
And we are your hosts and fellow music educators. In each episode, we will interview a guest who is an expert in their field, here to provide us insight, strategies, and inspiration to help you elevate your ensemble. Hey everyone, the conversation ran a bit long, so instead of cutting it short, we have two options for you. The full episode for those wanting to listen to the whole thing, and an abbreviated episode with the high points, but kept to our 30-minute-ish time frame. We'll have both of those available for you on the podcast. Our guests today are Mark McGahey and Stephen Gulledge. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, David. Nice to see both you and John today.
Mark McGahey is in his 36th year as a music educator, currently serving as the Assistant Director of Fine Arts in Birdville ISD in North Richland Hills, Texas, after spending 26 years as the Director of Bands of the highly acclaimed Keller High School Bands from Keller, Texas. Groups under Mark's direction have enjoyed notable success in the concert hall and on the football field, including finalist performances at BOA Grand Nationals, the Texas State Marching Band Contest, and the Texas State Honor Band Competition, in which his wind ensemble was named as the 4A State Honor Band. In 2018, the Keller High School Band performed in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York City, and in 2021, the Keller High School Wind Ensemble was an invited ensemble at the prestigious Midwest International Band and Orchestra Clinic. Mark is an active clinician and guest lecturer and serves as an adjudicator nationwide, most notably with Drum Corps International and Bands of America, having judged the DCI World Championships from 2013 to 2023, and recently at the Bands of America Grand National Championships. Stephen Gulledge is a career private teacher of 28 years, having spent the last 20 years serving the Keller High School Band Program and recently moving to the Flower Mound High School Band Program in Flower Mound, Texas. Students under Steve's tutelage have experienced significant performance success, winning top positions within the Texas All-State Bands and orchestras. Steve also runs the Trumpet Room, an online resource that provides a customized private lesson experience for the communities that he serves. Today, we're talking with Mark and Steve about fostering a great private lesson program.
So actually, Mark, kind of going off of that, since your private lesson program at Keller High School, it was so successful, are you able to kind of talk about some key elements that made it so?
Sure. It takes all the ingredients, as you can imagine. It takes motivated students. I mean, that's the first key. Supportive parents. It does require, with private lessons, there has to be some resources in place. Some of these things do cost money. It doesn't always have to be that way, but it has to be that supporting personnel. And then, of course, having that great communication that we try to have is a partnership with the private teachers, and then really try to get the most effective private teachers for each one of these to make it happen. So you're trying to pair all these key elements together. It's no secret that we had some great longevity while I was there, and like a lot of them are still teaching there with private teachers that taught for 10, 15, in some cases 20 years. That does develop quite a bit of a strong foundation when you're able to put those key students together in any kind of ensemble.
Yeah, it is. I mean, sometimes it's luck, but the
Very much so.
majority of it is extremely careful planning and forethought and then also, did you ever have to course correct midstream? Like, this isn't working so well, we need to think about this, or, how did that work?
Sure. I mean, as you can imagine, you're having to zag when you've been thinking about zigging. It's growth mindset in all areas that we do, especially in teaching music. The students aren't the same anymore. They've evolved over the course. This is year 36 for me in education, and they want to see a payoff sooner. We have one of the few things left in music education where there's delayed gratification. And most anything, whether it be a video game or even anything else they get, it's immediate pay. It's them getting some kind of, hey, we're going to the next level, or I want to be able to go to the next class suddenly. And it's like, that's great. We're going to put one pebble in this glass jar. And okay, you're better today. Now tomorrow we're going to put another one in, and we have thousands more to go. And it takes a lot of maturity, especially for a younger student, to be able to evolve and be able to trust the adults in the room and be able to say, no, I recognize the growth. Getting that 30,000 feet view, kind of back up a little bit and say, you know what? Look, you are, man. Look over the course of time, something you never even realize how much progress you've made. Your range has gotten better as a private student. The flexibility has gotten better. You can now play this level of a solo or even play this level of band literature. When you started the school year or 2 years ago, you couldn't do that. So helping those students kind of guide through it. It's hard. And there's very few things in life where they still have that same reinforcement. We have to show them the value of that.
Agreed.
Right. So I have another question that's next, but I want to kind of go back just for a second. You mentioned in your previous answer that you needed motivated students and there are some resources necessary. Can
Mhm.
you talk through us a little bit through like the motivation side of that? Like how did you handle that from the director of band's perspective? And then in terms of resources, obviously our listeners have a lot of different kinds of resources from
Absolutely.
zero to a lot. I'm sure when you started, you didn't have the resources you had when you finished.
Right.
So, how did you develop not only student motivation, but resources to create success?
Sure. Um, i- it does take showing value is the first thing, and with that, it can be a scenario where the students or maybe even do a partner lesson with someone to start with. Let's say if it's a financial need, or even
Hmm.
just the master class. That's generally one of the first introductions to. Hey, there's someone who's a specialist on this, and then it's educating parents. Like, no, wait a minute, I'm paying you to be the band director, and I've heard this from other directors across the country who I know have to struggle with this their school board, their different areas. These are very prominent band programs that will say, "I hired you to do all of this. Why do we need all these extra people around?" And then in some cases, covertly having to bring in professional musicians to come in and teach these master classes
Right.
to help out. And I understand that in Texas that we are so fortunate to have uh, it's something that's valued, it's held in high regard, and it's protected a lot. The resources I'm currently in a school district where there's a wider gamut, quite a bit from my previous school district. Students that it's a challenge to be in the program, and so many cases there's lots of scholarships available. The connection between the student and the private teacher, it's a business venture, and it is in most school districts where this is their income and their living, and so it has to be in addition to them being enrolled in the band class. How many obstacles and how many hurdles can we remove? Can we say, you know
Right.
what, here's a motivated students who've shown a lot of promise, and a lot of them want to do it, but the ones that are really kicking in, and you could say, you know what, we're going to continue to scholarship as many students as we can, but especially the ones that show that I really am progressing and I really like doing this, and to show appreciation too. I think there
Yep.
has to be something where I was in my other school district. It was okay. I want you to pay for half the lessons. I want you to at least do that much. And if you can't, let's find something that's a balance in your household. We all know that in many cases this is not the only uh, student that's in the family. It's one of
Right. For
three.
sure.
It's one of four, and they're getting pulled a lot of different directions. It's athletics, and it's this. It's dance classes, and we're trying to support all of them. And we understand it's a hardship, and many band programs understand that and are able to cooperate with the families.
Right. You mentioned value. So obviously, not every uh, person you run across is as wonderful a teacher as Stephen Gulledge. Stephen's
Right.
obviously a high quality private lesson teacher. How do you, or how did you, as a director of band, select and recruit this caliber of private lesson teacher for your program?
I think recruit is a fair word. I've known Stephen quite a long time as a student and also as a young up and coming music educator. You pay attention. In the Dallas Fort Worth area, we're very fortunate that people can live in this area, play in several ensembles. They can uh,
Hmm.
provide a living for themselves with so many band programs where they could piece together a studio. It's hard, as we know, as a double read private teacher. It's hard you have to travel. There's
Yeah,
two here at this school, there's two here at this school. In Without trying to take away from other programs, we want to show that we value. We see that you value the same things we value, and especially the student first. It's the old adage of we're not teaching trumpet, we're not teaching music, we're teaching students, and we teach the students who happen to play trumpet, the students that happen to be musicians, and you could see that immediately with Steve. That hey, he values teaching. He is invested and then some. With the commitment level, and the students are like, yeah, I'm on board with this. Um,
yeah, absolutely.
Being able to get them to be a part of your program. And I think that I would hope Steve would say it's mutual, where you can see, hey, I'm going to be supported here, and this is a neat environment that it's a mutual respect club, and we all were able to kind of go through supporting the student. We had lots of practice room discussions Steve and I had about let's talk about this student, let's talk about what where do we need to go from here? What do we need to do? What's the next way we can devise a plan that can give a better support net to these young musicians?
So then, Stephen, I'm gonna begin this question with you as an unbelievably successful private lesson teacher. Trying to build a cohesive and effective relationship between the private lesson teacher and the band director is critical. Do you have any advice on how that is done? And are there any attributes that will help you as the private teacher be as successful as possible to assist the band director in achieving the overall programmatic goals?
Yes. So if you're a young private teacher that's getting plugged into a program, like maybe the beginning of your undergraduate degree, the first thing that you can do is knock on the door and ask questions. Hi, my name's Steve. How can I serve your program? A private teacher really needs to have two jobs. The first job is to serve the student, and an additional job is to serve the band program. And so if you serve the student, a kid is going to tell you, here are some of my goals. That same conversation needs to happen with the band program. What do you need from me? What kinds of skills does this particular section need? Is it recruitment? Is it, do we need to create a value system musically that it hasn't been here in a while and you would like to see us support the program in that way? It's really just having a communication of what the deficiencies are, and then it's okay. Let's create some sort of a plan to plug the hole, and then it's just a matter of consistently going to work every day to plug those holes, and the machine starts to grow that way. But young young private teachers having the confidence to ask, and then band directors being able to take the time to know and to remember you have a staff back there in the practice rooms that want to serve you. And if the private teacher doesn't make an effort to come visit from time to time and ask these questions, maybe the band director needs to knock on the door and say, let me give you some feedback on our end. And I've been lucky enough to be a part of programs that have done it both ways. And I think that's the best way.
Can I
Yeah,
piggyback on
absolutely.
one thing that Steve said?
Yeah,
It's
jump in.
the consistent showing up to work every day with the flexibility in the schedule becomes great responsibility. Life gets in the way. Life is a part of it. What we do is just a part of it. It's the travel, it's the car, it's the traffic, it's the family. It's there's an important doctor's appointment. They all happen. We all have those. But it's crazy to see how many private teachers in general get hired, and it's like, man, just come to work, just be here, dependable. And it's the constantly remaking those. And Steve and I have had this conversation a long time. He presented at Midwest to upcoming private teachers. And I think your number one thing was show up and come to work, and
Right.
just do it at all costs. And don't go to step two unless you have completed step one. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It really is.
It sounds to me like the idea of communication, we were going to ask some questions about communication, but we kind of just talked about like the communication between the director of bands and the private lesson staff is imperative for this to move forward in a positive
Mhm.
way. Because my next thing to ask was really for you, Marcus, how do you ensure that private lesson teachers are aligned with the goals of your program?
Sure.
But at the same time, it seems like there's communication, but is there more to it than just communication?
Well, and that's what drives the world. I mean, the whole area of just making sure things are clearly stated. It's the frequent communication. You do have to trust everyone's been hired to do a job, to do their job. You can't micromanage, and you have to have that idea. I think it's the I wouldn't say daily, but weekly, in a frequent area of, hey, this is something where, how are things going for you? Tell me how we're doing on the all region preparation, just talking in a really general view. And then you back up even to uh, curriculum. Okay. We got through the end of the year. I noticed there was some lags and students, not even talking about if they got a first division on a solo, that those are all byproducts. The student was
Mm,
prepared, or there's maybe holes in some of their area. I know a certain woodwind instrument where I've had a private teacher, and we had a discussion that the students had limited flexibility. The music that the top couple of bands required them to be able to double tongue, triple tongue, then of course be able to play fast articulated passages. what are you working on in this partnership? Is there a solo you're preparing? Are you doing any fundamentals with them, flexibility, teaching them in harmonics, for instance, and going through
Mhm.
this? So we learned a lot about it. Hey, let's grow this area where is good enough to play some things. But again, we didn't have that back and forth reciprocating conversation. I think it would have still probably had the same stumbling blocks. And that teacher was more than willing to do it. It's like, yeah, absolutely. I can definitely push these upper end students and prepare the younger ones too.
I think I would encourage um, band directors to just take an inventory on, you know, let's call it the flow of what a private lesson looks like in your program. And whenever kids come into the private lesson room, what do you think that they start with, and then what do they move to, and then how do they end that lesson? I think a band director should know kind of what the flow is for a student, and if a band director wants to contribute or have some direction over what that skill set, do we start with tone, technique, range, flexibility, articulation, all state etude solos, whatever it is. um, I think that's a better process than just letting a private teacher show up to your campus and then letting the kids say, here's what I want to work on today. That's
Right.
probably the worst way to do it. Having private teachers that say, here's what we're going to do today, having it already thought out and planned out. And then maybe another level is a band director saying, here's, you know, like I can remember for years, my time at Keller High School, we would share walls or share a portable or whatever it is. And I was always very, very impressed that it felt like the first 5 minutes of a lesson across any instrument, I would just put one ear. The first 5 minutes between all of us was all really pretty similar. And then the next 10 minutes and 15 and then 45. And there was a progression. And I wouldn't say that it was something that we had like regular meetings on to make that happen. But as a private faculty of professional musicians, there's just some things that are a little bit more common sense. So if you live or teach in an area where you don't have something like that, I think you can create it. And I think it is very reasonable for a band director to say, here's what I would like for private lessons to look like in my program. And if you have people that don't want to support you in that way, well, that'll take care of itself. But I think it's okay for a band director to have that standard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So then, Steve, going off of that, how do you balance the expectations of ensemble directors with the individualized focus of private lesson instruction?
Well, the best way that it seems to be the most comfortable for me is I like to invest in concepts and exercises that have two or three different benefits in one thing, like exercises that maybe do a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of fingers, and a little bit of tone at the same time. I I spend a lot of time and energy with the individual kid. I spend a lot of time with the band director, and we might do something with just individually with the student for 2 or 3 weeks, and then we may come back and do something with the full trumpet section for a while. So finding exercises that accomplish more than one or two things at a time, and then being able to create additional value by like additional sectionals, additional master classes, giving the kids a chance to get their work done in a group setting in addition to just their individual. So teaching, the private lesson is to give kids the individual skill, the sectional, the master class that happens, separately on a Saturday morning or whatever it is. That's to help the kids organize themselves on like instruments so that those students now can come into rehearsal as a bigger puzzle piece. And a private goal that I always had for myself is I wanted to accomplish two things while I've been a private teacher. One is I want to stay in front of the band director. So any private teacher that is listening, try to stay in front of the band director. Give kids skills before that they need it. And then number two, I always took a lot of pride in participating in rehearsals and looking and watching things and just sitting off to the sideline and just noticing that they don't ever have to stop rehearsal for the trumpet section. That was something that I was really proud of too. So if the private teacher can see the holistic, the big picture, and then notice like, man, they're talking to the trumpet kids a lot or the clarinet kids a lot. Okay, you need to spend some time and think about that. And we need to minimize that part of rehearsal.
Even this may be part of your questions later, but a testament to Steve's dedication. I know not all private teachers can do this. I'm really aware. He had his normal, we were fortunate to have private lessons in the school day. I know that's a luxury and not everyone has that. In his large studio, it would be we had marching band after school at 7 a.m. It would be, hey, all the trumpets, we're getting together. We're going to have a sectional. Many times as a teacher, I wasn't paying him for those. Not that I wouldn't pay him $1 million and give him a lot, but he would just suggest, can we get together and do this? And I'm like, absolutely. And it's to see students pretty tired, pretty bought in to playing their trumpets a lot. The benefits, it would be all state trumpet student next to a ninth grader. And they're doing paired on the first etude in Texas, and they're playing it together. The eye-opening part and the benefits are huge. You saw mentorship happening. You saw things that happened outside of it that were probably great discussion points, Steve, in your private lessons. Hey, what'd you think about today? What'd you think about getting to stand next to that first-year All-Stater? And then the younger students are like, I see that I'm going to have to play a lot bigger. I have to really exaggerate my dynamics. It was tenfold in what we were able to accomplish, and that was the buy-in of the students. And he would say, like a Saturday, hey, we're all meeting at the band hall on a Saturday. Sure enough, the kids are like, okay, Steve tells me to do it. I'm going to get better at my trumpet. And that's a culture. That's what that is. That's where it goes from a private studio and it transcends to being a culture.
I would encourage every private teacher on the planet to make that sacrifice, whether you get, or maybe not even called a sacrifice, make that investment, whether you get paid for that hour or not. You need to do it. And the reason that you need to do it is number one, from 7 to 8 o'clock every day is your chance to get to the kids before the kids get to the ensemble or the band program. And so that's where you have the best chance to develop the student's correct, fundamental, pedagogical relationship with their instrument. 7 o'clock, I'm going to teach you how I want you to come to the instrument instead of letting them come to the ensemble first, where the band director now has to think for every instrument. That's too much. Like, a band director can't give a clarinet kid and a trumpet kid exactly what they need whenever it's the first time that they've put that horn to their face. So we got up early, and from 7 to 8, we got our trumpet work done first, so that then you could go to band, having already been a trumpet player, and then you go to the next rehearsal or the next rehearsal. And over time, I felt like I had a lot of influence over the skills that were introduced, the pacing of it, how skills matured and developed. Um, I invited students to the sectionals that were not involved in the private lesson program. They eventually participated in the private lesson program. So for a young teacher that wants to develop some sort of their own private lesson program, that's where that happens. Don't wait for a band director to call you. Don't wait for anything. You just have to say, I'm going to make this investment, and it's not going to pay off immediately. You're not going to see money in the bank immediately. Figure out, manage your money, whatever it takes. You need to make that investment because it's going to pay off on the back end of it for you and the program bigger than you can imagine.
Thinking about that, how do you provide feedback to the private lesson teacher, and how do they give feedback about student progress in this whole partnership?
Whenever it comes to feedback from a private teacher needs to feel comfortable going to a band director and saying, here are some skills that we might need to develop further. Here is some literature, some exercises that could possibly develop those skills a little bit further or better. And a band director needs to have the trust and the confidence of the private teacher to at least try it. And I have been very, very lucky over my lifetime where I can go to Mark and say, hey, can we try this for a little bit? And I don't know that Mark ever told me no. And Mark can come to me and say, hey, we're going to go to Macy's. We're going to play some of the heroes. We're going to write for this in the Marching Band show, and we need these types of skills. So beyond the feedback of like how well your students do in region, area, all state, my own studio, I typically reward three things: attendance, attitude, effort. And so as a private teacher, if I'm going to be able to give feedback to the band director on those three things first, hey, this person is not showing up. This person is showing up with a bad attitude. This person is showing up with a great attitude, but their effort is very low. And those types of concepts go beyond just who's playing sharp or flat. So just consider the whole thing whenever you're talking about feedback and you're talking about the instrument or the kid.
He's spot on, and especially that partnership. A couple things that come to mind where I can truly say, I mean, I'm a better teacher because he was pushing me a lot of times. And we would think we'd kind of arrived and kind of done pretty well. And we knew we had some limitations. I remember a distinct moment where we were talking about the students and flexibility and on trumpet and in all brass instruments. And it kind of went beyond lip slurs. And he said, well, hey, here's this other one that it's beyond a standard lip slur. Scott Belt, I believe, the exercises, and it involves some finger combinations crossing over overtones. And I went, this is genius. And it's written for all the brass instruments. And guess what? He was doing it in a lesson. He said, let's try it. And he said, let's see if we can do it in the band program. It took us to another level. It was like, this is really hard. If we can do these skills that are times 10, playing a basic lip slur that is
Right.
normal, it was a piece of cake. I had enough trust is Steve, and I want to definitely challenge all band directors to do this. These are professionals that are in your group, and they know the students sometimes as well, if not better than you do. I can remember almost all of my concert programs. I would come to Steve and say, "Help me decide who plays which part." And so 3 parts, sometimes it's 5 parts, and we all know, brass players here. If somebody's doing all the heavy lifting, that's tiresome.
Right.
It does require to have some depth, but Steve, a lot of times I remember everything, Pines of Rome, everything we were doing. Like, hey, let's figure out the best person to play this. Hey, here's on the march. This other student is really good, an all region level player. Let's let them do the heavy lifting on the march. Let's give students a chance to back off a little bit. And in turn, it was like, hey, we're all going to take the lead at different times. And I would put that as much with Steve, like, hey, help me design this pattern that would be best suited for the instrumentation. So when we got done with whether a Midwest program or 3 UIL pieces that were in full length, 45 minutes, we had the best balance of students being able to say, I'm still prepared and I'm still fresh, even on the last song, just like it's how we began. So it was definitely us together deciding this thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Can I piggyback on that really quickly? Because
Sure.
you're actually asking a private lesson teacher to come in and provide guidance to you on part assignments for
Absolutely.
ensemble music, which is, I don't know that I've heard of that happening
No,
very often. So
you have to
obviously
check
that's
your
just going to
ego at the
require,
door too.
yeah, exactly. There's a lot of trust that's involved for that to occur.
Yeah.
Could both of you speak to that just a little bit? Like, how did you develop a trust to the level that I'm releasing that to a person that's like not necessarily going to stand up there and
Yeah.
conduct it when it's all said and done, because
It's all on you. Yeah.
that's a tough one, like, right? So how did you develop this trust between you?
I don't know if I would have put that on 19-year-old Steve Gulledge, who was a marching tech for me. Hey, Steve, what do you think we should play right here? But
He
he
to be
threw
fair,
in.
he should have, because they would have been better than.
He is all talk and all hot air as always. Yeah. It
Oh,
was,
that's funny.
I mean, we taught together for, I don't know, 30 years, 25 years. And it was great to see just the trust. It is hard to do that at the beginning, but you can definitely see if somebody has a really good hand on the pulse just through a natural conversation. Like, hey, what would be your recommendation here? You don't have to follow it.
Mhm.
but you can look at it and say, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. That person would be better playing bass trombone on this. That one person would be able to play first part, and that's my angle. It was developed over time, so pretty nice.
So my recommendation is that that could happen at every level, because here's what I see as a private teacher. Um, Middle school band programs that have maybe one or two strong players in a section that are given the bulk of the work. I have seen a lot of scenarios where that individual kid goes home and is carrying the weight of the literature on them for an entire semester, and it has in some cases led to some bad habits. But at every level, for Mark and for David Puckett and for the people that I've taught for, I have always really appreciated the opportunity to oversee some of the part assignments and contribute in that way. And it helps the private teacher feel like they're a fabric of the program instead of just something on the periphery. So if you're a band director that's looking for more ways to include your private teachers into a culture, that's a really simple way. And you're right, you don't have to take their recommendation, but create the opportunity for the private lesson teacher to serve you in that way.
I really like the idea that this is kind of shaped into you're a professional, and the things that you're talking about now are being professional, showing up as a professional, and building out your studios. It's a professional career. I don't know that every private lesson teacher looks at it that way. In terms of ensemble directors that are out there that are either starting or would like to improve their private lesson programs, what advice do you have for us? And we'll go Mark first, and then Steve.
Sure. And listening to Steve talk, it boy brought up so many more ideas that are definitely kind of related to this topic. We're fortunate to have those professionals that can help our ensemble sound better, and we're the ones that get to stand up and wave the baton in front of these talented students, and it was definitely something I didn't take lightly to have that. I mentioned this earlier, but it's obvious when a private teacher is invested in the program. And then it's also obvious when their studio becomes more than just a private lesson studio, but it becomes a culture. Little things along the way. This isn't the only thing, but it's when they choose to help the students and they're not getting paid to do it. Hey, can I start a trombone choir? Hey, can I meet with the flute students? I heard them playing in class. Could I take 5 minutes with them afterwards? The investment in the student. They're not the only thing, but you could tell that they're really about what the whole program being successful. Uh, when you could see multiple sections in the band program really take off like that, that's huge. In addition to students wanting to take lessons, being a professional, playing in great ensembles, playing in orchestras, that's kind of what you want your private lesson staff to have. But I want to see that they value as much, if not a little bit more, that they're a teacher, an educator. And that's not for everyone. And I want to see some. Steve Gulledge has a great balance. I had several in all of the studios that could do those type of things. I could tell they really, really, really enjoy teaching. It wasn't something to fall back on. And I like, well, you're not a good fit for us. So anyway, I think it has kind of a balance that you're looking for, that they have those type of areas, but they can definitely spend as much time on the students as much as they would going to the next gig. So
Yeah, I love that you use the term culture. Like it's such an important word, and I don't know that I've seen that necessarily as a priority for private lesson
right.
programs. So Steve, on your side, same question. What advice do you have for ensemble directors that are either starting or wanting to improve?
Well, if it's the private teacher, I think a common error for private teachers is that they talk too much. Um, I see more value, especially the younger that they are, letting the kid play and play more often. You're not going to talk that kid to first chair all state. You can't just talk to them and then have them understand what they need to play their horns in their lesson, and it goes by fast. So maybe talk to them a little bit, but they need to play. The second thing is that you need to play also, because that's their only opportunity to sit next to someone that's older than them. their whole band life is surrounded by their peers. And you need to be in a position where you play and you demonstrate and you play for them often and you play things together. Um, it's those two things to me are the closest to my heart, and it's the things that whenever I travel around and kind of visit other band programs, I just kind of keep one ear on. And I think that's the biggest upgrade that private teachers could make, is maybe talk a little bit less and then let them play a little bit more.
It's a
Mark,
free
Steve, thank
T-shirt.
you so much for your time today. I've
Yeah, it
learned
was
a
a
lot
pleasure.
just listening to this. I'm sure that our listeners will as well. But we really do appreciate you being with us and sharing your expertise and how we can all be better teachers for our students.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks for
Thank
having
you
us.
for having it. This is great that you guys are investing in music education and teachers. This really says a lot, because you definitely don't have to do this, but you definitely see a place and a platform to do this for a lot of folks. Thank you for taking time to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, that's a wrap for this episode of Common Time Podcast. We hope you gained some valuable insights and inspiration to take back to your ensemble. New episodes of Common Time Podcast drop every Monday. We hope you enjoy the show. Please take a moment to leave us a rating or a review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us reach more music educators just like you. And a special thanks to our wives, Jessica and Teresa, for keeping us organized enough to make this happen. Also, don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media platforms at Common Time Podcast for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and more. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Keep making music and keep making a difference.